is up, my friend? It's Mikey Henninger from Basement Brewed Fantasy Football. Thank you so much for tuning into episode 2 of BBFF's Inside the 20. We made it. Episode 2. If you didn't get a chance to check out any of last week's episodes, man, we really do have some really good stuff going on, some really good stuff cooking. And yes, I recognize I'm completely biased when I say that, but I'm not the only one who said that. My wife told me, my kids told me that the last 2 episodes were good, so I'm feeling good about it. If it's your first time tuning in to Inside the 20, if it's your first time checking out any of BBFF's episodes, last Tuesday morning we released episode 1 of Inside the 20, and we started our conversation on new faces in new places, specifically as it pertains to NFL coaches and head coaches and offensive coordinators. We took a deep dive into what the hiring of Jim Harbaugh and Greg Roman means for the Chargers, and more specifically what it means for fantasy football. And we also talked about Cliff Kingsbury's hiring as the Washington Commanders offensive coordinator. And then on Friday morning, we showed episode 1 of BBFF's In the Trenches, where I sat down with Green Bay Packers offensive lineman Lane Taylor. The guy spent 8+ years protecting a Hall of Fame quarterback in Aaron Rodgers, and we talked about pretty much everything you could think of. We talked ball, we talked fantasy, we talked barbecue, we talked Disney princesses, we talked Aaron Rodgers, we talked Pokemon, everything that I could possibly think of. We talked about it. So the cool thing about the internet is that if you want to catch those episodes, feel free to press pause on this bad boy and go find them. You can find them on the YouTube channel. You can find them anywhere you listen to podcasts. But as for today's episode, episode 2 of BBFF's Inside the 20, we're going to spend most of it talking about the arrival, or I guess I should say the re-arrival of Raheem Morris in Atlanta as the new head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Before we dive into any of that, just one really quick housekeeping item for any of you that might be considering subscribing to basementbrewedff.com. If that's a subscription you're considering for beating your friends on the fantasy football this season, just a really quick note that on March 1st, so in 4 days or whatever, 4 days or 5 days, on March 1st, the pricing of subscriptions is going to go up. Okay, so if it's something you're serious about and something you're wanting to do for 2024, I recommend pressing pause, heading over to basementbrewedff.com, and grabbing one of those subscriptions before the price goes up on March 1st. And to sweeten the offer, I'm doing another Willy Wonka type giveaway where the first 3 people that enter promo code Inside the 20, which is all caps, all one word, Inside the 20, the number. The first 3 people that do that are going to get 20% off their subscription to the starter package. If you want to be the ultimate high achiever and make the absolute most out of this one life that you're given, then you need to get in touch with Paul Conley from High Achievers. High Achievers is a mastermind group helping men grow, achieve big goals, and develop friendships that are lifelong and meaningful. Yours truly is a member of this group, and it meets every single week on Thursdays, helping each other professionally and personally, and helping each one of us become better fathers, better husbands, better professionals, better entrepreneurs, better men, and quite frankly, better humans. Get in touch with Paul Conley from the High Achievers using the notes that are left for you in the show notes. All right, so after episode 1 of Inside the 20, where we talked about Jim Harbaugh going to the Chargers and Cliff Kingsbury going to the Washington Commanders, and more importantly, what that stuff means from a fantasy football standpoint, one of my subscribers inside of our BBFF community, a Discord channel for my subscribers, asked if I could focus this next episode on the unknown of the Atlanta Falcons and what that's going to mean from a fantasy football standpoint. And luckily for him, I am not a good pre-planner, and I'm not good with time management as a one-man business, as a one-man entrepreneur, so I thought, yeah, sounds like a great next episode for Inside the 20. So, this first one we're going to focus on is the Atlanta Falcons. And if you're not privy to the situation, Atlanta decided to move on from Arthur Smith, and fantasy football fans rejoiced everywhere. And in Arthur Smith's place, they brought in 47-year-old Raheem Morris. Now, Raheem Morris was, for the last 3 years, he's been the defensive coordinator for the LA Rams with Sean McVay. In fact, he was the defensive coordinator for the Rams when they won the Super Bowl in 2021. They had the top-ranked defense in all of football that season, so a very strong campaign for Raheem Morris back in 2021. But this actually isn't Morris's first stint as a head coach in the NFL. Way back in 2009 to 2011, he was the head coach of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, and it didn't go so well. And it was a tough act to follow. He had to follow John Gruden, who had recently won a Super Bowl with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. But in those 3 years that Morris was the head boss of Tampa Bay, his units went 17-31, and his defenses, even though he was a defensive coordinator by trade, his defenses did not do too well at all. And that's probably putting it politely. His defenses were 27th or worse in both scoring and yards in 2 out of the 3 seasons he was the head coach of the Bucs. And in 2011, which proved to be his final season as the Buccaneers head coach, his defenses finished dead last in scoring, so points allowed, and they finished 30th in offensive yards allowed. So it got pretty ugly. Funny enough, though, this is a fun little fact about Raheem Morris. This technically isn't even his first stint as the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons. Back in 2020, Dan Quinn was the head coach of the Atlanta Falcons, which is funny because we just talked about him a week ago. And unfortunately, Dan Quinn was fired in the middle of the season, and the man that stepped up to fill those shoes and become the interim head coach of the Atlanta Falcons was none other than D coordinator Raheem Morris. So he went from part-time fill-in coach in 2020 of the Falcons to full-time head boss of the coach in 2024. He's inheriting an Atlanta Falcons defense that last year finished 18th in scoring and 11th in yards, so a decent unit to start with, a decent unit to try and mold. Interestingly enough, he actually has the third best odds, at least right now, as of the time of this recording, as of 5:34 p.m. on Monday, February 26th. He has the third best odds of winning NFL Coach of the Year, behind only Jim Harbaugh, Matt LaFleur, go Pack Go, and Raheem Morris, who's number 3 on that list. Now, from a fantasy football standpoint, again, remember, Raheem Morris is a defensive-minded head coach. He's a defensive coordinator, so he is going to turn the offense over to a brand new offensive coordinator in Zac Robinson, who, again, this is his first time ever at any level, college, NFL, any level, being the offensive coordinator of a football team. Now, if you're not familiar, which there's not much reason to be, Zac Robinson, he was originally a quarterback. He was drafted in the 7th round by the New England Patriots way back in 2010. He spent some time on some different rosters with the Patriots, the Seahawks, the Lions, the Bengals, but the guy never got a chance to play a down in the NFL. And his his coaching career began in 2019 when he was scooped up by the Rams and he was hired by Sean McVay to be an assistant quarterback coach. So Zac Robinson's been with the Rams for each of the last 5 years. He spent his entire coaching career in the NFL under Sean McVay. He also spent some time with Kevin O'Connell. But the quick caveat that we have to deliver before we dive into any of this data is that none of it is directly attributable to Zac Robinson, because he wasn't the offensive coordinator at the time. He doesn't have any experience as an offensive coordinator, but we do know that he's coming from a terrific tree in the Sean McVay coaching tree and the Kevin O'Connell coaching tree, where typically speaking, those are offenses that you do want to be invested in fantasy football. So we're going to go year by year, studying what Zac Robinson has done in the NFL as it pertains to his time as a coach with the Rams. So in 2019 was his first opportunity. He was hired as the assistant quarterback coach. The Rams were a pretty good football team that year. They finished 11th in scoring and 7th in yards. They were a pass-heavy team under Jared Goff, finishing 3rd in passing attempts and 4th in passing yards. The rushing offense wasn't anything to write home about, finishing 18th in rushing attempts and 26th in rushing yards. That season, Jared Goff was the QB 13. Todd Gurley was the RB 14, which actually isn't too bad considering that was the year that it was pretty clear that the arthritis was wearing him down and creating a washed-up former stud running back. That actually ended up being Todd Gurley's last year with the LA Rams and his second to last year in the NFL entirely. Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 4 that year. It was actually the second best year of his career. He caught 94 passes, he had over 1,100 yards, and he had 10 touchdowns. Robert Woods turned in a top 14 wide receiver campaign. That was the second best year of his career. He caught 90 passes, over 1,100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. And then you got Tyler Higbee, who finished as the number 8 tight end on the season, which was, by the way, one of the top 3 years of his entire career. He had over 700 receiving yards and 3 touchdowns on a very nice 69 catches.
Nice.
In 2020, Zac Robinson moved over to the assistant wide receivers coach. And that year wasn't a terrific year for the LA Rams, one that proved to be Jared Goff's last year as the team's starting quarterback in 2020. The Rams finished 22nd in scoring and 11th in offensive yards, so not too bad there. They remained on the pass-friendly side of the NFL, 12th in passing attempts, 13th in passing yards, and they became significantly much more rush-heavy that year, finishing 7th in rushing attempts and 10th in rushing yards. Now, it's worth noting that year, the 2020 season, was the year that the Rams had the best defense in the NFL. They were ranked number 1 in both scoring and in offensive yards, so there was plenty of rushing opportunity for the Rams as they killed the clock and as they controlled the clock. There was no need for them to be forcing plenty of passes. It was easy for them to rack up a lot of rushing volume, which we often see from teams that have a very strong defense. Individually, Jared Goff was the QB 19 that year. Again, it was his last year in LA. They moved on from him and brought in a new quarterback, who we'll talk about here in a second. And the Rams actually had a 3-headed monster of a committee that year. There was Cam Akers, Darrell Henderson, and Malcolm Brown, all 3 of which landed between 101 and 145 carries. None of them finished better than RB36 in fantasy football because it was such an ugly 3-headed monster in that backfield. There it was, voice crack again. Robert Woods was the wide receiver 12 that year. Cooper Kupp was the wide receiver 26, and Tyler Higbee crashed back to earth as the TE tight end 17. Again, the story here in 2020 was that the Rams sported the best defense in the NFL that season. There really wasn't much that they needed to even ask their offense to do. So then we move on to 2021. The Rams got rid of Jared Goff. They brought in Matthew Stafford, and they had a pretty good season from an offensive standpoint. Notably, Zac Robinson moved from assistant wide receiver coach back over to being the assistant quarterback coach again, working directly with Matthew Stafford. Now, that season, the Rams, in general, they had a pretty good offense. They finished 7th in scoring and 9th in offensive yards. They finished 10th in passing attempts and 5th in passing yards. And Matthew Stafford himself finished as fantasy's QB6 with the second best completion percentage of his 15-year career, 67.2%. He finished with the 3rd most passing yards in his career, and he tied for the most touchdown passes in a season in his entire 15-year career, which, again, that's notable considering Zac Robinson did move over to being the assistant quarterback coach of the Rams in that season again. Now, from a rushing standpoint, it wasn't pretty. The Rams were forced to use a committee of Sony Michel and Darrell Henderson after Cam Akers tore his Achilles. Both Michel and Henderson handled over 178 touches. They finished 23rd in rushing attempts and 25th in rushing yards, but who can fault the Rams for taking a pass-heavy approach when you have Stafford versus a rush-heavy approach when you have Sony Michel plus Darrell Henderson? Now, as I mentioned, Stafford was the QB6 that year. Henderson and Sony Michel were RBs 27 and 32. Robert Woods was the wide receiver 17 in fantasy points per game. Tyler Higbee was the tight end 14. And as you know, Cooper Kupp went absolutely crazy in 2021. Let's just go through these numbers because you have to when you see them. 191 targets. Voice just keeps cracking. I'm hitting that puberty thing all over again. Cooper Kupp, 2021, 191 targets, 145 catches, 1,947 yards and 16 touchdowns. The guy averaged 25.9 PPR points per game in 2021. Again, we can't really give Zac Robinson all that credit because he wasn't the offensive coordinator. He was the assistant quarterbacks coach. But still, he oversaw, or he was a part of, an elite season, seeing what can be done when you get the ball into the hands of your best players. And we know Atlanta has some pretty good ones. Moving into 2022, Zac Robinson received some added responsibility from the LA Rams, serving as the team's quarterbacks coach, but also as the passing game coordinator. But unfortunately, as far as highlights go in 2022, it pretty much ends there. 2022 was a bit of a shit show for the Rams, where Matthew Stafford only played in 9 games. They were forced to turn to a combination of Baker Mayfield, John Wolford, Bryce Perkins. Cooper Kupp only played in 9 games. Cam Akers was coming off an Achilles injury. The Rams finished 27th in scoring that year and 32nd in yards. And it was bad news for basically everybody involved, except, to be fair, Tyler Higbee did finish as the tight end 6 that year in fantasy football, setting career highs in targets with 108 and catches with 72, adding the second most yards of his career with 620 and third most touchdowns with 3. So not bad for Higbee, I guess. So moving into 2023, the Rams rebounded really nicely. Zac Robinson continued to serve as the team's quarterbacks coach and passing game coordinator, and the Rams had a really good year offensively. They finished 8th in scoring, 7th in yards, and then they finished top 14 in pass attempts, pass yards, rush attempts, and rushing yards. So they were above average in every facet, including finishing top 8 as an offense in both scoring and yards. Great season for them as an offensive unit. Individually, Matthew Stafford finished as fantasy's QB 15. Not terrible, but not great, but not terrible. Cooper Kupp only played in 12 games, but he still finished as fantasy's wide receiver 24 in points per game. You had Kyren Williams, who came out of nowhere to finish as fantasy's RB7, even despite missing a few games. The main thing here, the most exciting thing here, as we're projecting towards the Atlanta Falcons in 2024, is last year Kyren Williams averaged dang near 22 touches per game, including 4 targets per game. So if Zac Robinson, who was a part of that offense, observed and studied how effective Kyren Williams could be as a bell cow, just imagine what we can get from Bijan Robinson. Bijan? Totally second-guessing all of that. Who knows? But imagine what he can get from Robinson if he saw what he got out of Kyren Williams. And then, oh yeah, by the way, you got Puka Nacua, who finished as fantasy's wide receiver 4 despite being a 5th-round rookie from BYU. The guy caught 105 passes for dang near 1,500 yards and 6 touchdowns as a 5th-round rookie from BYU. If you're looking for the ultimate secret sauce in your fantasy football leagues, something that I can all but guarantee you your league mates don't even know exists, then you got to get over to basementbrewedff.com and see what we're doing over there. If you're new to the Basement Brewed Fantasy Football channel, then the one thing you need to know about me personally is that I actually quit an ascending decade-long B2B sales career so that I could dive all in 100% and focus only on this fantasy football analysis business. So now I'm spending 30-plus hours per week digging through spreadsheets, looking at fantasy football strategy, and researching every single player on every single team and making it all available to you so that you have a wealth of knowledge at your disposal anytime you need to go in and crush your friends. So, assuming you're the type of person that likes to outsmart your friends, dominate your leagues, win contests on FanDuel and DraftKings, cash in on NFL bets, then you got to get over to basementbrewedff.com, where we already have 300 plus fantasy football players doing just that with our insights, our resources, and our amazing, amazing online community. Plus, the first 3 subscribers that enter promo code INSIDE20, all caps, all one word, they're going to get 20% off their first year subscription over at basementbrewedff.com. So pause the episode and go now. So, to recap, in 5 years as a coach in the NFL, Zac Robinson has worked for 2 years with Jared Goff, 2 full years with Matthew Stafford, 1 year of a weird mix of Stafford plus Mayfield plus Wolford plus Perkins. We can forget that year altogether. He spent time with Todd Gurley and Cam Akers and Darrell Henderson and Malcolm Brown, all of which were either injured or working as part of a committee before finally seeing what a bell cow in Kyren Williams could do. He saw offenses that were 11th or better in yards in 4 of 5 seasons. He saw offenses that were 11th or better in scoring in 3 of 5 seasons, 14th or better in passing attempts in 4 of 5 seasons, and 13th or better in passing yards in 4 of 5 seasons. He was a big part of strong seasons from Cooper Kupp in 2019 and 2021, Matthew Stafford in 2021, Tyler Higbee in 2019 and 2022, and then you got Puka Nacua and Kyren Williams, who came out of nowhere in 2023. So he's been a part of good offenses. He's been a part of meaningful seasons from individuals in fantasy football. And ultimately what it comes down to for the Atlanta Falcons is who is going to be playing quarterback. That's going to be the most important factor in determining how effective this offense can and will be from a fantasy football standpoint. But from a coaching standpoint, with Zac Robinson coming from the Sean McVay coaching tree and seeing some of these successes in the past, there's plenty of reason for optimism for a concentrated Falcons offense in 2024, one that he can revolve around Bijan Robinson, Drake London, and hopefully Kyle freaking Pitts.
So you're telling me there's a chance? Yeah!
That's all I got for you today on episode 2 of BBFF's Inside the 20, which, I know, delay a game, move it back 5 yards. Once again, we're inside the 25, but please continue to show me some grace. I promise you we're going to get this thing inside the 20. If you like this episode and you're listening on podcast, please do me a solid, leave a 5-star rating and review. And if you're watching on YouTube, please go ahead and like this episode and be sure to subscribe to the channel so that you don't miss out on what's coming up in the future. In fact, come back on Friday morning for episode 2 of BBFF's In the Trenches, where one of 2 things is going to happen. Either A, I'm going to be interviewing another former NFL ball player. I'm literally just waiting to get a text message back from him to see if he'll be available for Friday. If he's not, then we will be spending episode 2 of In the Trenches talking about some speculative new faces in new places, meaning players that could be wearing some new jerseys, some new threads when that first football is kicked in September of 2024. Until then, come find me on Twitter. Let's hang out there at BBFF Mikey. Hang out with me on TikTok at BBFF Mikey. And hang out with me on LinkedIn at Mikey Henninger. And again, one last reminder, the first 3 BBFF subscribers are the first listeners to use promo code Inside the 20 on basementbrewedff.com is going to get 20% off their subscription. And if you're looking at subscribing, do it quickly because those prices are going up on March 1st. That's all I got for you today. I'll see you on the fantasy football field. Cheers. This brew's for you.